I apologize that this is in video rather than in person, but I think that you would rather have video than germs. And so please excuse my voice as I go through the videos. I wanted to go over some of the changes to Accountability 2023 with you. um, we know that no student can go backwards. We know that we want all of our students to move forward. And how we know that they're moving forward is by looking at their STAR scores and comparing them from one year to the next. And so I wanted to go over the changes with you in how we are determining that student growth on STAR. There's not a whole lot of change, but there are some changes in it. The first part stays exactly the same. If you scored masters last year, then this year you need to score masters again in order to get your point. Okay, if you scored meets last year in 2022, this year you need to score meets or masters in order to be able to get your full point. Some of our biggest percent of droppers was in masters. Students who achieved masters did not maintain their masters in 2022. So we really need to make sure that we pay attention to those students, because those are the students that some of the times we leave on their own for growth, and we need to make sure that we are monitoring their growth as well. All right, here is where the changes begin to come in, and that is that we are dividing did not meet and approaches into two sections. We're going to have high approaches, low approaches, high did not meet, and low did not meet. And the students in those performance levels are going to have a little bit of a different criteria. So a student who 2022 scored high approaches on their math or reading test, when they take a math or reading test in 2023, if they score high approaches again, they will only get half a point. Because remember, approaches means you're not to grade level yet. You are approaching grade level. And if you come to a grade level with approaches, that says that that teacher, that class, that school is supposed to be doing interventions, accelerations, and remediations throughout the school year in order to close those gaps. So if you're staying there, you did not close enough gaps, you should be moving up to meets. So if you score high approaches to get your full point, you need to score meets or masters. If you score low approaches and you stay in low approaches, you get a half a point because you didn't go backwards in a performance level. But in order to get your full point, you have to close enough gaps to be able to get to at least high approaches. Okay. If you scored high did not meet and you scored high did not meets again, you didn't go backwards, but you didn't close enough gaps. So you only get a half a point. But if you did close enough gaps to move up to low approaches, you score 1 point. If you scored low did not meet and you score high did not meet, that means that you closed enough gaps where you get 1 point. Now that's pretty similar to what we did in 2022. The biggest difference is this: we're going to divide these into high and low, and we're doing everything off of performance levels. The other change that comes into place is it doesn't matter if you're switching testing languages from one year to the next, since we are doing performance levels and not scale scores. Okay, the big change that comes in growth is the fact that the state is adding a Part B to growth. We know our new word is 4545. That's no longer a number. That's now a word. That's now a classification. That is now a student group in many ways of thinking. Okay, and if a student did not score if the student did not score approaches or better in 2022, we know that in 2023 that we have them in some type of 45-45 class, tutoring, acceleration, whatever your campus calls it. And so a 45-45 student is going to be counted once in Part A, and they're going to be counted again in Part B. And so what that means is the student who did not meet grade level in 2022 in Part B, in order to get their point, they have to score approaches or better, which is the whole idea behind 45-45. Okay? So what that means is a student that scored high did not meets last year, scores high did not meets again this year, they get a half a point in Part A. However, their denominator is 2, not 1, because they get counted here and they get counted here. So a half a point with a denominator of 2 means that student only scores a quarter of a point. Okay, if a student scored low did not meets and this year scores high did not meets, they are in part A, they are in part B. That means that this is a numerator of 1. They did not get to approaches, so they do not get this in their numerator. Therefore, it's a numerator of 1, a denominator of 2. Therefore, they only earn a half a point. Okay, so part B is our biggest change, and the fact that we have to keep our students moving forward, and that the goal is to get everybody to a minimum of approaches and never go backwards. All right, let's look at let's look at how this may work. TEA has not given us the cut points yet. However, from feedback from the different committees and input that we are receiving, it appears that they will simply be changing those performance levels to be cut in half. So when we look at this, we know a master's that stays in master's gets the point. A meets that stays in meets or goes up to master's gets a point. A student that is in high approaches needs to move to at least meets. A student that is in low approaches needs to move to high approaches. Okay. Now, what this means is that different students will have different ranges of growth that they have to make. So, a student that is here in low approaches has to make the distance to here to high approaches. A student that is here in low approaches has to make the growth to here in high approaches. Okay, same idea. A student that is here in low did not meets has to make it to here to low to high did not meets in order to get their point for part A. Okay, but in order to get their point for part A, everybody in this red, in order to get their point for part B, everybody in this red has to move to this pink. Okay, so our students who did not approach, we need to get them at least here to low approaches in order to be able to get their point in part A and part B. All right, the next big change that's going to affect you is the fact that our student groups, when we talk about domain 3, we're talking about looking at all of our data via student groups. And that's important because that is part of our federal accountability. Well, they are changing how they do domain 3, how they look at the student groups in domain 3. Remember, we had a student that if they were emergent bilingual, if they were economically disadvantaged, if they were special ed, if they were foster, if they were homeless, then they counted in each of those categories once. And those students counted over and over and over and over again. Now, if the student scored masters, we celebrated, but if the student score did not approach, then we bemoan that score. And so let's look at how we're redoing the student groups. First, all students will be in all student groups. And so if you take any STAR test, you will be in the all students group. STAR, all, you'll in the all student groups. Where the change comes in is in our race and ethnicity. Okay, we are only going to have domain 3 calculated on 2 race or ethnicity groups. And those 2 are your lowest student groups from 2022. So if you were at Barber Middle, your 2 lowest student groups for 2022 were African Hispanic. If you were at Dunbar, Hispanic and white. If you're at Lobet, African American 2+. If you're at Krantz Junior High, African American Hispanic. If you're at McAdams Junior High, African American Hispanic, and so on for all. So you see that each campus has their own 2 student groups. Okay. And then here we have a high focus group. And that is if you are economically disadvantaged, emergent bilingual, special ed, highly mobile, and highly mobile includes the homeless, the migrant, and the foster students. All of that now becomes one big group. All that becomes one big group. and therefore the students are only counted once. It is an unduplicated group. Okay. And then we have our special ed former, which is a federal requirement. That is a group of students that they have been dismissed from special education. And then we have continuously enrolled, which is, again, a federal requirement. The continuously enrolled and the all students is fairly close for our district, but for some district, they need to look at it because the, excuse me, the continuously enrolled is what helps the feds and the state track how your curriculum and your teaching is throughout the lifetime of the student in your district. And it tells the vertical alignment. It tells how well you're continuing, how well you're keeping those gaps closed, all of that kind of stuff for the students that stay with you for their entire educational career. Okay, the other change is our minimum size group. Our minimum size group is now 10 tests, not 10 students, but 10 tests. Because we know in domain 3 that we have math, and we look at this math meets or better, we have reading meets or better, we have math growth, we have reading growth, and then we have student success. And that student success is where we put every test into the pot. Okay. And so the minimum size of 10 really shouldn't affect us much because of the fact that we're only using 2 student groups in the race or ethnicity for domain 3. Those are the largest changes that will directly affect teachers. We're making sure that no student goes backwards, making sure that our students that did not meet at least gets up to approach us.